Hello and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about my build and playstyle in Elden Ring, very similar to the video that Gary posted a few weeks ago. Now my playstyle is very different, and if I had to give it a name, I would call it Holy Shite. And in honor of that, I'm just going to drop a quick message. Oh yes indeed, it is time for Holy. So before we go any further, I will just show a little bit about my attribute points and where I place my skill points in. I'm level 81 at the moment, so I've been playing this a little bit of time now, probably about halfway through, but lots more places to explore. So my character wouldn't be able to wear very strong armor. As you can see, my endurance level isn't the highest, so I put 30 points into vigor. I've got 17 points into mind, which I'm finding is just about right to get through FP and manage it well, as long as I've got plenty of cerulean tier or blue flasks on the go. Endurance is 18, which gets me just about to where I want to be in terms of what armor I can wear and the weight of the weapons I can wield. Strength is 20. Dexterity is quite high at 35. I've put no points at all into intelligence because I don't use any sorceries. And as you can see, the faith skill is where I put most points. That's at 42. And arcane is untouched at 9. So just going to go through the equipment that I'm using at present. My main weapon remains the Uchigatana, which is the starting weapon for the samurai class. My class of choice is the Confessor, but the reason I've stuck with this sword over and above the broadsword that the Confessor starts with is for a couple of reasons. The first is that the Uchigatana has incredible range for a sword. It, has a wider hitbox than most of the other sword weapons do. It's also very fast, particularly when you scale up with dexterity, or put points into dexterity rather. You can inflict a lot of damage very quickly. It also has a passive effect of causing blood loss build-up. Excuse me. And so when you inflict blood loss, it very quickly takes down an enemy based on their health points. But although I could increase those effects more by equipping a Bloody Slash Ash of War, which would increase those effects of blood loss, I've gone with a Holy Ash of War to turn this into a Sacred Uchigatana, so it now scales with faith. So although it's only got a C class scaling at the moment, because I've got 42 points in faith, that ends up doing a lot of damage very quickly. And I'll show you that Ash of War in action a little bit later. Next up, I've got a shield, which is how the Confessor kind of starts with a broadsword and a shield. This is the same shield that I started with, and I've kept it because when you equip a Sacred Ash of War, in this case Golden Parry, it scales quite nicely and gives you some added protection. So I've just stuck with that for now. The second two weapons is a dual wield Cypher Pada. The benefit of this weapon is that it has absolutely no weight to it whatsoever. So because my endurance points are a little bit on the low side, this is a massive bonus. And when you're dual wielding them, they can do a lot of damage very quickly. And again, they both scale with faith, and the faith scaling is B. So when you have 42 points in faith and you've got faith scaling B, you can inflict very, very high damage very quickly. The downside is they're very short range, so you have to be up close and personal. Now, the next one was gifted to me by Gary because it has an incredibly low drop rate in a certain area of the map, and it would have taken me forever and a day to acquire it. So very grateful for him for this. This is a Halo Scythe, which is a faith scaling scythe weapon, which got a very interesting active effect, which I will show you a little bit later. And I think the cream of the crop for my equipment is the Erdtree Seal. That's slightly different to the finger seal that the Confessor starts with, but if you draw your attention down to the attribute scaling, I've got this scaled up to faith level S. which means that all of my incantations, which are mostly offensive, do very high damage very quickly. So that's an incredible bonus. I'm not going to talk too much about the armor because I'm kind of mixing and matching it as I go, just based on how much protection I can get away with the rather low endurance level I have. I can't equip very heavy armor, but I do have a number of talismans that help with that. So this is currently what I'm working with at the moment. Moving on to talismans then. I've only got 3 at the moment. I don't have the 4th slot unlocked, as I noticed Gary did. But just going through them one by one, I've kind of gone for things that boost my skill points in other areas, because with so much points in faith, that means I'm a little bit spongy in other areas. So I've gone with Radagon's Soreseal, which greatly raises attributes in about 4 different domains that include strength and endurance, and a few others. It also increases the damage taken, so it's a bit of a trade-off in terms of how much better armor you can equip for the weight, versus how much damage you're able to take. I combine that then with the Sacred Scorpion Charm, which raises holy attack, but again it also comes with the disadvantage of reducing my defense. So my whole playstyle is sort of based around doing a lot of damage from a distance, using the shield for protection, and then moving in when it's safe to do so to hit some of those short acting attacks like the Cypherpada or the Uchigatana. And then lastly I've got the Great Jar's Arsenal, which again raises the maximum equipment load so I can have better armor. Now this one I interchange a little bit depending on what's called for. So I would sometimes use this one, the Clarifying Horn Charm, that greatly raises the amount of FP or focus I have available to me. That's if I'm fighting a boss in which incantations are going to be the preferred method of attacking. Occasionally as well, if I need to play very defensively, I'll equip one of these 2 talismans, the Great Shield, which boosts my guarding ability, or there's the Curved Sword Talisman, which enhances the guard counters. That's when you use your shield to block an attack and then you stagger them. So those can both be quite useful. Additionally, if I'm going to go up against the boss where I'm going to use a lot of incantations, I might use the Radagon icon, which shortens the spell casting time. That means I can get more attacks out in a shorter span of time. As for how I've divided my flasks, it's a bit of an even split. I'll sometimes mix and match depending on what I'm doing, but at the moment I've got 6 of the health flasks, the Crimson Tears, and 5 of the Cerulean Tears. I use a lot of FP in this build, so it's very, very important to make sure that I'm constantly balancing both my health but also my FP usage. And as I'll be talking about in a few moments, my incantations and my weapons are mostly built around holy attacks and lightning attacks. So the Wondrous Physique, or however you say that, is mainly around boosting the offensive power of those 2 forms of attack, lightning and holy. Alright, so just going to talk about incantations now. My build uses a lot of incants. I don't really use any spells, so I've not got a staff or anything, so you'll see those are kind of red X'd out at the bottom. But I do use my seal very often, and one good thing that's very useful to have is an urgent heal. That's when you've used up all your health flasks and things are getting a bit ropey, maybe towards the end of a boss battle. It's useful just to have another option to heal yourself, and that's something that I'll use quite often. If I'm playing with a cooperator, I might switch that out for a heal. That kind of drops a yellow ring on the ground, and that heals your collaborator as well as you, but it's a bit slower to use, and you have to make sure everybody's lined up and in the right place to operate it effectively. So when I'm playing by myself, I prefer to use the urgent heal. There's a lot of lightning damage to be had with both the honed bolt and the lightning spear, so those 2 are used very often. If there's a boss that's sensitive to flame damage, the Flame of the Fell God is a very useful skill to have that can do a great deal of damage. As you can see, it requires 41 points in faith, and I've only just kind of met the cutoff for that, and no more. So that's an incantation that you're not really going to see until you're at the sort of level of faith that this build offers. Stylistically, it's a very, very cool incantation visually, and does a lot of damage. And then last, I've got this one, Frenzied Burst, which emits concentrated blast of yellow flame, frenzy from the eyes. Now this is all about building up madness, which is something I've been experimenting with in this build a little bit more recently. The only problem with this is it affects you as well as the enemies. So when the madness meter gets right up to the top, the enemy can't do anything, they just crumble in a heap and they lose an awful lot of health. And you could just kind of have at them. But the same is true for you. There's a weapon I sometimes switch out for my Halo Scythe, which does something similar, and when you combine this incantation with that weapon, you can do a great deal of damage very quickly. So those are the 5 I have equipped at the moment, but they're by no means fixed. Depending on the situation, I might switch to more defense orientated incantations, such as cures for poison, defense against magic, fire, and rarely use Assassin's Approach anymore. It's one of the sort of starting incantations you get with a Confessor, but Rejection can be quite useful if you're being mobbed by enemies. That produces a shockwave that knocks all of your enemies down. I sometimes use Poison Mist as well. The Flame Sling I've sort of replaced with Flame of the Fell God, so I don't use that so much anymore. And if I'm fighting an enemy that's weak to electric damage and I want to use more than just my incantations, I might equip a sword and equip this incantation, which turns the sword into an electrified weapon. So I'll just show you what some of these spells look like now here in a second. Okay, and now we'll use some of our spells. So this one is Frenzied Burst. Here's Honed Bolt. Okay, next we got Flame of the Fell God, just like this. And now Lightning Spear. And now putting them all together, along with the only Spirit Ash I really use, which is Godric's Soldiers, to give a bit of range, as I don't use a crossbow or a bow myself. Okay, now we'll just show you all of those weapons we've talked about in the series. So we'll start with the Cyclopada. That's the unblockable blade skill. So a shielded enemy cannot compete with that. Now we'll show Sacred Blade on the Uchigatana. And now we'll show the Halo Scythe in action. Okay, this time I just want to demonstrate Golden Parry. And this is just to demonstrate the power of faith scaling on the Sacred Blade, even when the first attack doesn't connect. Quite considerable damage output there. I forgot to mention the Coated Sword, which is another holy weapon that I will occasionally use instead of the Cipher Patter. For that reason right there. It's got a much longer range on a special attack. Okay, so because the Holy Shite build is quite fixated on sacred or holy attacks, it is sometimes occasionally necessary to mix up the weapons that I use, just to try and do different things. So the first one I want to show you comes from the remembrance of Robert Grafted, I think he's called, and it looks like this. Next up, this is Vike's War Spear, which is more of a madness build. This one goes really well with the Frenzied Burst Incantation together. But as I said, you have to be a bit careful with how it affects your own level of madness. You can see my madness meter is building up there quite steadily. And the last one, although it is a holy type, I like it because it's got some good range, and that is the Tree Spear. So I've got an Ash of War on this called Sacred Order. Alright, I reckon that should do it. Thanks very much for watching. Until next time.
Hey!
But just before I go, I wanted to make the point that sometimes the best offense, the best strategy, is to do absolutely nothing at all.